GMOs. They're in our food. They are our food. They could cause cancer. But what impacts could they have on a broader social scale? Let's find out. Hello, Art again here to talk about another misunderstood food, or rather, category of foods. We'll be discussing GMOs in this mini-series, some of the science behind how they are created, their possible effects on the human body, and some of the socio-political and economic aspects that influence their use. One thing that I want to disclose before diving into some of the details is that this video is made under the assumption that the genetic modification of living organisms is ethical. While it is, and should be, up for debate whether or not mankind playing God with living creatures is or is not ethical, this video is intended to discuss solely the effects of GMO research and consumption in addition to the rationale behind their use. I don't want to advocate for or against the use of GMOs. I'm merely trying to provide folks with the information to make their own best decisions about the GMOs that are and will likely continue to be present in our markets and in our food. However, we can't start talking about GMOs without first defining what they are. According to the World Health Organization, GMO stands for genetically modified organism. Any organism that's had its genetic material, or DNA, directly altered by biotechnological processes. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid and is the blueprint for all life on this planet. It is the substance within all living cells that contains the instructions for them to self-replicate and organize themselves into the bodies that we inhabit. Pretty neat stuff. On a more detailed level, DNA holds instructions for cells on how to make proteins. If DNA is the blueprint, then proteins are the building blocks for life. All of our cells and a lot of the junk that our body produces are comprised of proteins. DNA holds the instructions for which proteins to produce at what times. The minute differences in interactions between these proteins sum up to form our bodily processes and our physical forms. The process by which DNA is translated into proteins is called gene expression. What GMO technology does is alter the baseline DNA that cells use as a template for gene expression. Researchers first identify a gene or a DNA sequence that they wish to engineer into a specific organism. In agriculture, this is commonly a gene that produces a protein that results in herbicide resistance, drought tolerance, or improved nutrient content. This gene could be from the same organism, or it could be from an entirely different organism. As an example, golden rice is a rice that has been modified to produce beta-carotene, a nutrient that our body uses to produce vitamin A. Genes that produce beta-carotene were first identified in various different species. These genes were isolated and purified from their native species and then inserted into traditional rice seeds to produce golden rice seeds. This insertion process is done primarily by either using gene guns to force metal particles coated with the appropriate DNA into the seed cells, or by using a bacteria to infect the seeds and thereby insert the gene of interest. Once the gene insertion is complete, the plant can be grown to maturity and will begin to use its own internal cellular mechanisms to begin expressing the gene as proteins. Note that GMO technology does not alter the fundamental nature of gene expression. It merely changes the instructions in the form of DNA. Part of the concern around GMO usage is that the technology could be used to produce crops that, deliberately or accidentally, would produce poisonous compounds or unsafe proteins that could then be consumed by humans. However, as in the case of golden rice, many of the modifications done to agricultural crops result in the plant producing proteins or compounds that are already ingested by humans. All of the introduced compounds that aren't normally found in people food are controlled per the regulations of the market in which they're sold. Another concern is that in consuming GMOs, humans could take on some of the genetic changes of the modified organism, thereby leading to cancer or other health issues. However, as we went over previously, genetic modification needs to be very highly targeted, and it requires a vector for gene transfer, like metal particles or bacteria. The GMO foods that we consume don't contain any vectors. They only contain the byproducts of gene expression. There's a common saying that you are what you eat, which implies that the food we consume becomes a part of us. This is only partially true. Our bodies break down food into its component proteins, which we then metabolize. We don't incorporate DNA by eating, which is why I'm not turning into a steak or an eggplant as a result of my diet. In the same way, if I was to eat golden rice, I would not myself start producing beta-carotene and turn orange. I would merely metabolize the beta-carotene already present in the rice. The GMO products that are available for consumption currently have all been fairly researched and don't have a strong likelihood of containing modifications that could affect human consumers. However, it is important to be able to distinguish the science behind GMOs from their implementation in society. Interpreting the scientific aspects behind GMOs in a vacuum is an oversimplification of the debate around GMOs. While the technology is safe, the ways it is used and abused can certainly be harmful. Next time, I'll attempt to unpack the intent behind GMO usage and the ways that intent can be skewed by various interests and lead to social harm.